Hi, I'm Jeff Liautaud, and I went to a school that was billed as the friendliest college in America. What I experienced there was something I never wanted to give up. What I had at Quincy College was a sense of community. And by sense of community, I mean an environment characterized by togetherness and sharing as opposed to cool detachment. The leaders in the environment know the members and go out of their way to be helpful. There's a sense of group loyalty and group support. Personal diversity is celebrated for its contribution. The atmosphere is cohesive. The environment is a community. So I set out to try to understand what was the difference, and that became difference in environments. And that became a lifelong journey for myself. I did that for about 10 years, maybe 12 years. And I wasn't, in any event, I discovered that even with sense of community, there still can be a longing inside of a person for a desire for wanting more. And so I discovered that there's a sense of community that you can have when you are taking your highest, what you value the most, and putting it at the center of the sense of community that you're providing. They value something very highly. So if we think in terms of that which you value the most as being at the top, our feelings tell us if we're on target as a human being or if we're off target. So we have this built into ourselves, and everybody has this. So if we think in terms of what each of us most highly values, then it comes down to what are the instrumental means to being a good citizen, and what is a good society? Stated another way, how do you get happiness for the individual and sense of community for groups of which we are a part? Those have been my lifelong quest. The question is, do you need to have the same highest value in order to have sense of community? Does everybody's beliefs need to be the same? And the answer is clearly no, because there's lots of examples of people who work together well who do not have the same belief. For example, at work, you can have a good sense of working together. Or take living together in a village where people are civic-minded, they want to do things for the village. It's shown by their actions, the things that they do. So you do not have to have the same beliefs in order to have a sense of community. Nor do you have to have the same beliefs in order to have happiness. Each of us go down our own paths. So other examples of groups that can work very well together but don't have the same beliefs are, for example, a sports team. And it comes from, personal diversity is celebrated for its contribution. And another example, of course, is family, where there's an integration in spite of differences under the ideal circumstances. So you can achieve peace and harmony without having identical values, which is very important to know. In fact, no two people are ever going to have the identical values because we're all built differently. I mean, it goes right down to our toes. If we examine our toes, there are no two toes in the world that are the same. So what we want to do is we want to work together in spite of our differences. So it's important to know that the things that we value the most, how we deal with them, is unique for each of us. Sharing what we most highly value out in the open is it can be scary, and many prefer silence, just not to talk about it. But we also know that when our feelings are meant to be shared, and when we bring them out in the open and tell another person about what we value the most, we're bringing that into the light. So we know that feelings are meant to be shared, and what's going on there is that the human being has a defense mechanism that we want to protect our conceptual scheme of how we see the world. It can be very scary to have our conceptual scheme challenged, and that's the defense mechanism. So your defense can come up, and yet also inside of each of us we have a need to grow, and so we're wanting to get better. So understanding what's underlying this is that on the one hand you could have rejection, and on the other hand you could have growth. Now, to do an integrity check means that is what I most highly value, is it being implemented in my life? How am I doing at living out what I most highly value? And that we have seen comes through our feelings. So, next question is, who's good at sharing what we value the most? There is a group of people. You can look to the Interfaith Dialogue, what's called Interfaith Dialogue. Did you know that there's a group of people who are engaged in setting the principles for interfaith dialogue? And I'm only using this as an example of sharing about what we most highly value, what each one of us most highly value. So how do they do it? First and foremost is that an attitude is acquired as the result of listening to various points of view and ultimately forming one's own view, defined as a manner of acting or thinking, a disposition, opinion, or mental set. So you got to have an attitude. So as for example, if we were to have a group of people who spends a week together, let's say they're family members, and you want to avoid proselytizing during this period. At the same time, you want to be true to your beliefs. You want to state your own beliefs when appropriate, but mainly listen well, which means hearing an entire message so that you build unity. And the main purpose of interfaith dialogue is peace on earth. So the question is it possible to have an attitude that can be permit other people to talk so that they have less risk of rejection, because this attitude is one of inclusion. You're mostly wanting to hear and understand the differences so that you can live together and be together. It's a beautiful example of people working together for their own highest goods. What we can come to agreement on is a need to change ourselves. There was a newspaper that ran a series, and they invited famous people to say, "What's wrong with the world?" And one individual wrote back and said 2 words. He had the shortest response. He said, "I am." So, if we want to make the world a better place, what's the one thing we have control over? Ourself. So, in order to change ourselves, that's a very good thing. It always works, and it never fails. Because our integrity check is always coming up short, if we're honest with ourselves. So if you want to be on top of everyone, be beneath everyone. People know good example. So your goal is to provide good example. And one way you can do that is by sharing a concern that you have about yourself and it's not the other person you're talking about. It's something you're wanting to achieve your highest values, and you're concerned about your handling of something. Then others who are nearby, it can be just informally on the beach or upstairs at dinner time or whatever, and then others can share from their own personal experience what they've done if they have faced that same thing. And then the individual can put together, the individual shares the concern, can put together what they like best of all the alternatives and share that, share it back to the group, and then it can be reviewed in terms of the primary values that permit happiness for the individual and sense of community for the group. In conclusion, what we can do is to learn about what others most highly value, help them achieve what they most highly value, encourage them, be on the journey with them, and have faith that they'll get to the same end place we're going to, even if it's even if it's not identical beliefs. We can at first look at the basic elements necessary for success and for intentional community building. And then we can say, oh wow, this is actually working. The biggest thing is that, I mean, probably even bigger than anything else, is that we just stay together and that we spend time together. Those are the things that over time will be in it for the long term. And if the person doesn't want to share a concern about their handling of something, they don't have to. And we have to recognize that it's good example that will carry the group. And you can just be a good person, and you will affect the group. And it only makes sense, doesn't it, that if you want to be a better person, you can affect the group better. So that'd be how I would set up a values/integrity check-in process. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you.